In Mark chapter 8, we begin with Jesus once again feeding a multitude of people. And so while this may seem like a repeat of the story from chapter 6, when we look carefully at the details, we can see that these were two different occasions. Beyond the numerical differences in the accounts, one took place in a Jewish region, while the other in a Gentile region. So it's important that we don't just skip over this thinking it's a repeat. In the beginning of chapter 8, it says a very large crowd had gathered, probably because of the report of Jesus' healing of the deaf and the mute man right before this. But by this point, the crowd had been with him for 3 days. They were eager to hear Jesus' teaching and experience his healing. We can take a lesson from these followers. They had been with him 3 days, listening and learning, and many receiving healing. They seemed to have no regard for food as long as they could be with Jesus. How often are we so excited to spend time with Christ that we miss a single meal, let alone 3 days worth? I usually am planning my next meal while I'm finishing the current one. But it appears that they could have been fasting for 3 days and nights, and it's possible that they were afraid to leave because they might miss a blessing. Jesus' fame was growing so much that in verse 3 it says that some had traveled from faraway places just to see and hear him. When Jesus fed the 5,000, he expressed compassion for the crowd's lost spiritual condition. But here, Jesus expresses compassion for the people's physical needs. Remember, Jesus was not only fully God, but also fully man, so he could empathize with their hunger, having experienced it himself during his temptation in the desert. Jesus saw their faithfulness and cared that due to their hunger, that some of them might faint on their way home. When we read the entire story, we see the disciples have somehow forgotten that Jesus had just performed this miracle, almost the same one, not long before this. So they're panicked about how they're going to feed all these people with what they have. But it's important for us to remember that sometimes we can be just like the disciples and forget the miracles that God has already done in our lives. God always supplies our needs, not necessarily our wants, but our needs, just like he did multiple times with the loaves and the fishes. This miracle provision was not just for one particular time, but is always available when we are totally concentrated on Jesus. We can see in this story that Jesus is always caring for his followers. But each of us can look back and pinpoint a specific time in our own lives when that care was more obvious than others. At Northside, we often encourage our church to put a pin behind their prayers and to journal how God is working in their lives. So my challenge for us today is to take that one step further and start writing down those miracles of provision. That way, the next time you find yourself in a time of need, you can look back and be reminded of all the times that God has provided.